Hello everyone, welcome to the news desk here on the second morning of Pro Tour Oath the Gatewatch. Rich and Randy here with you for part 2 of our look at the Magic Online Draft Archetypes. These are the most powerful cards that you have been drafting in your 3-0 draft decks on Magic Online. So Randy, yesterday Ian was here sitting in that seat and we worked our way through the ally colours. So now we go to our second set of 5, which means we begin with the truest of enemies, if you will, certainly in colour, real life, white against black, and we're going to see white-black join together, and this time around it's allies life gain.
Yeah, I don't know about this enemies thing. These are the best friends.
Right.
In fact, this white-black deck is consensus best deck in the format. Like, if you can get the white-black allies deck, and I mean, it's got life game themes, it's more of just cohort is the new addition. You've got the life game synergies baked in still from Battle for Zendikar, but the cohort synergies from Oath of the Gatewatch really give this deck a late game power and inevitability that is unrivaled by basically any other deck in the format. You want to get allies, you want to get cohort, and then you want to get synergies. Okay, so why don't we take a look at the top 5 commons picked in Oath of the Gatewatch. So removal, ally. Look how high Vampire Envoy is on that list.
Right.
It's above Oblivion Strike. Now, some of that is the way the data is gathered, right? These are the most frequently first through fifth picked cards.
Yep.
You don't get past Oblivion Strike very often.
Sure.
So like the truly elite commons maybe show up a little bit lower than you'd think. But it does tell you how good Vampire Envoy is, how much you just want to get allies and you want to find creative ways to tap them. Cohort in particular.
Yeah, it's a terrific card, Vampire Envoy. And Ian, yesterday, if you haven't seen part 1 of this, you should check out, because Ian has a lot of inside R&D perspective on this. We were talking about the double white commitment to Isolation Zone.
Sure.
One of the reasons you don't get past Oblivion Strike is it makes it super easy to cast.
Single
it's just
black,
a single black, which is great. So those are your commons. Let's move on to the uncommons in Oath of the Gatewatch in this color combination. And we begin with the gold signpost uncommon. Randy.
Yeah.
So this is the thing that if you're new to draft and you see a Cliffhaven Vampire in the pack, you know that built into the card are all the things that black-white is meant to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a perfectly reasonable card to start your draft with. It's a great card if you get past it to say, oh, I see. I'm just going to be the white-black deck. Because the guy on my right just said I'm not going to be the white-black deck. So great card to get. Soothsayer has a very powerful cohort ability. You know, Relief Captain has a lot of value, especially if you've got a deck full of allies anyway. These are the cards you would expect.
We had a look at green-white yesterday, but I want to ask you in this context, Relief Captain, it feels to me like support as a mechanic, the number after support is slightly out of focus, and you can never quite tell whether support 3 means support 2 or whether support 6 means support 3. You know, it's a number that really does tweak from game to game. I don't think people have really got a handle on what your real expectation is out of the number after support.
Yeah, you just know that having the option to do more is better than not having the option to do more. I mean, at some level, the bigger numbers just are better. Relief Captain, though, definitely demands that you have a lot of creatures in your deck.
Right. So then, of course, after your 2 packs of Oath of the Gatewatch, we move into BFC, Battle for Zendikar. Let's combine the commons and uncommons there. What stands out to you, Randy?
Yeah, I mean, Drana's Emissary and Serene Steward are exactly those life gain synergy cards that you're looking for. You'll take an Angel of Renewal, obviously. I mean, you see a lot of the life gain part of the archetype is here, and it happens to be on allies often enough, especially Kalastri Healer, that it also sets you up for all of those cohort synergies from the first pack.
Yeah, certainly the uncommons, though, they've been so weakened as fundamental parts of the strategy because they are uncommon in pack 3. So all those blissful drafts where you got to curve out with Kalastri Healer and Serene Steward and then Bloodbond Vampire on forward, you thought, yeah, basically I can't lose from here. A lot of those have gone away now because if you're lucky, you see one of those 5 uncommons in that pack 3 somewhere in there. So that's black-white. Let's go to a completely different pair now. How about blue-red? You've just seen William Jensen with many slip-through spaces. What's going on with blue-red?
Yeah, this deck can be almost a combo deck. You know, 6 slip-through space, is that what Huey had?
Yeah.
Spectacular. You know, Expedite can play a similar role where you've got the cheap cantrip that just says, I'm a spell and I replace myself to then turn on surge cards. Like, I mean, Tyrant of Valakut is the dream, but even Jwar Avenger is great.
So let's take a look at the commons then. What do we first through 5th pick? It's removal, and then 3 creatures.
Yeah, it's Surge, good removal spell, Surge, good Surge spell. And then this deck can also have a colorless theme. You see the Blinding Drone there. You know, these colors, blue in particular, is the best at using sea mana. So you'll sometimes see that show up as a mini theme as well. And Zada's Commando is it's just good. 2-drop, cohort, very good card.
Yep, no argument there at all. What about the uncommons then? We'd expect this to be another power level up the chain. You've got your gold uncommon, of course, Stormchaser Mage, the sort of pseudo-awaken, Cyclone Sire, removal with Devouring Flames. Tell me about Prophet of Distortion. That's a card that I certainly haven't played enough with yet to really get a handle on how often that's a fantastic card draw engine and how often it's a very disappointing 1-2 for 1 with no ability.
Don't put it in your beatdown deck.
Okay.
But if your deck has Blinding Drone in it, it's probably designed to go long. If you've got anything resembling sort of a mid-game or late-game deck and you've got colorless mana, you want Prophet of Distortion. Okay. The card is actively good if your deck has, you know, at least 3-4 sources of colorless mana, and it's not just a beatdown curve-out deck.
Yeah, something we saw with Paolo drafting this morning was that tension of, well, here are cards that want colorless mana to activate them and make colorless mana good, and here are colorless mana cards which I'm going to need to actually make those cards playable. And it was a very interesting, I think Ian referred to it as a clinic that Paolo had put on about this tension between those two sides.
Dance.
Yeah, certainly not a deck I find easy yet, for not at all. All right, so let's move into Battle for Zendikar then. How does that add to the blue-red mix?
Yeah, these are great colors in Battle for Zendikar. You see just powerful cards like Rolling Thunder and Clutch of Currents that are just good in whatever you've got going on. But you also see, you know, some synergy. Eldrazi Skyspawner, that Scion does make sea mana if that's what you need. And you can definitely get a colorless Devoid theme going with Vile Aggregates, Nettle drones as well.
Yeah, I can't believe that middle line there, Eldrazi Skyspawner at common, Vile Aggregate at uncommon. I can't believe we're discussing that in the afternoons here at the Pro Tour in Modern.
Those are good cards.
I know they're good cards, but come on, nobody saw Vile Aggregate coming for Modern.
Well, Team East West Pole did, apparently.
Yes, apparently. The one room on Earth that unearthed Vile Aggregate. Great job by them. All right, so that's blue-red. Let's move on now to another enemy pair. It's black-green, graveyard colorless, Randy.
Yeah, this is a bit of a lighter theme. It doesn't show up very heavy in common. You see some uncommons like Seed Guardian that are like, yeah, you fill your graveyard up. Baloth, no, fill your graveyard up. Good times. It's also just, you know what? Treason removal has been good for as long as there's been people drafting Magic cards. And, you know, there's a good colorless aggro deck available too, because a lot of the early drops tend to be colorless. So it's not the most focused of archetypes. But yeah, that's what R&D planted there for us.
So I want to ask you, as a designer, and a designer of Magic cards as well,
Sure.
You say it's a light theme at common. Is that because basically complexity-wise, forcing players to think about the graveyard a lot, which is what you do if they're at common, is something that we want to broadly shy away from, and that you do want to see that attention of the gameplay shifting to the graveyard slightly less frequently than you do, there are my creatures, here are my instants hitting you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's part of it. I mean, look, developing a format for Limited, it's hard because there's just so many moving parts.
Right.
And if you're going to try to have sort of 10 color pairs, each of which feels a little bit different, it can be hard to sort of squeeze in, well, are all the themes going to be at common, or is this one going to be, oh, we have this awesome design. Sometimes you don't even have like the card design. Corpse Churn is a card though that I think is underrated, that people are just really starting to figure out. Yeah, it's not just the Raise Dead that you're going to draft late, throw in your sideboard and not use. The fact that it mills you for 3 and then regrows a creature is actually gives you a lot of play with some of the cards that are floating around, like a Seed Guardian or a Baloth Null.
Okay, fair enough. So let's go to the top commons then. Let's see what you end up with here. Top commons in Oath of the Gatewatch. We have removal in Oblivion Strike, Tar Snare, which I found very disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right, but I mean, again, this is first through fifth pick. You're not taking it first.
No,
you're taking
sure.
Oblivion Strike first. I think it is interesting, though, that the commons here, Scion Summoner, Stalking Drone, Tajuru, Pathwarden, these are not graveyard cards. These are just good sort of curve-out beatdown cards with a couple Devoid cards leading off the way.
Let's see how things change then as we go up the rarity to the uncommons. And yes, Baloth Null is... I know it's uncommon, so you wouldn't expect it to be the most powerful card in the pack, but the 3 we've highlighted there, those are all utter beatings in draft.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I actually really like the way R&D set up these gold cards. Like, we're seeing them come up often as, the top uncommon here, but that doesn't mean you're first picking it necessarily. Those cards are in a power level where they're really powerful in the right deck, but they're not just raw power, they actually float to the guy that's in that deck. Stormchaser Mage is the most drafted card in the blue-red deck, was particularly good in this sense, right? It floats to the guy who actually wants it. You don't have to first pick it to get it, which is a super elegant thing they've done with the design of this set.
Yeah, it turns out there's some very smart people working on Magic. No argument there at all. Let's go to Battle for Zendikar and see how the previous set shoehorns in with Oath of the Gatewatch.
Yeah, here you see many of the cards you're familiar with from before. Catacomb Sifter has a nice synergy with this deck, and you see how the sacrifice theme actually plays really nicely with the graveyard theme. Like, you wanted to sacrifice things in Battle for Zendikar, and now you want things in the graveyard. Turns out those two strategies kind of fit together pretty nicely.
Ian made the case yesterday the green has gone up in value significantly, which would not be hard from the previous draft format. Do you agree, though, that is true, that that's what's happened?
Yeah, green is a color again. It's absolutely, one of the colors. Many of the green decks are good. Some of the green decks are still a little handicapped by the fact that they don't get as much power level out of that third pack, so you really need to have a good first two packs. But it is absolutely just a much more balanced format than pure BFC.
All right, so next up we have red-white. Let's take a look at what traditionally has been a sort of ally pair, despite being an enemy pair, and it is indeed allies as our main theme.
Yeah, allies is the main theme here. There is another very light theme, even lighter than the graveyard theme, I think, with this equipment theme that's hanging out in Oath of the Gatewatch. But mostly this is, again, it's cohort. It's an aggressive cohort deck, which gives it not quite as much staying power as the black-white version of the deck, but can still be very powerful, especially if you manage to come out of the gates on curve.
All right, let's look at the top commons then in red-white. You've got Removal in Isolation Zone and Boulder, Salvo, and Reality Hemorrhage. And then the two, again, cheapness is the theme here, Andy. Both 2-drops, Zada's Commando and Ondu War Cleric. 2 drops
is you've zeroed in on exactly the important thing that's going on here. Ondu War Cleric is a card. I've seen people out on the floor first picking Ondu War Cleric over Fall of the Titans. That happened twice that I'm aware of.
Can you, sorry to be dim, it's early. Can you explain that to me? Because I can't ever imagine being brave enough to do that.
It starts with you have a color preference for white.
Sure.
And you really think the sort of white, cheap, cohort aggressive curve, that's just the right way to build a deck. You're basically trying to build a deck to have synergy rather than a deck to just have raw power level. Like, even the guys who would do that, like Craig Wesco did it yesterday and 3-0'd his draft.
Yep.
And Jason Chung told me this morning that I don't know if he did it on Magic Online in a practice draft or if he actually did it at the Pro Tour, but he said, I would do this.
Okay.
Like, I have such a strong white preference that I would do this, and that guy's 9-0 right now.
Right, yes, I should pay attention. All right, so let's take a look at the top uncommons then from Oath of the Gatewatch in red-white. Weapons Trainer, again, up front. There's Relief Captain, we've seen that. And Allied Reinforcements, the chance to go wide with 2 2/2s, and they're both allies. Trigger, trigger!
Yeah, and try not to get too distracted by the extra text on Weapons Trainer. That's a 3/2 ally for 2.
Right.
Like, that's plenty good enough right there to go into your red-white allies deck. And yeah, maybe you find a good equipment, or you have multiple weapons trainers, and even that equipment starts to become good. Okay,
so let's take a look at how Oath of the Gatewatch combines with Battle for Zendikar. There you see it, and of course you've got all the hits of Stasis Snare and Outnumber and Touch of the Void.
Yeah, it's removal and allies.
Yeah.
I think the uncommon allies are particularly better. Things like Chasm Guide and Firemantle Mage that couldn't really find a home in pure BFC. The white-red deck now is such a good ally synergy deck that those cards are just a lot better than they used to be.
And they're back-breaking, aren't they? Because suddenly that, here we go with haste, or even better, the Menace. Firemantle Mage thinks a lovely card. All right, we have one to go. We didn't save it till last because we hate you green-blue players, Brian David Marshall. But it's green-blue, it's Eldrazi Ramp.
Yeah, not...
Kind of.
Well, look, Eldrazi Ramp is a deck that's here. This seems to be the consensus weakest deck according to the pros, but still a totally reasonable thing if you get it.
Okay, let's look at the commons. Here we go. Scion Summoner, Blinding Drone, Jwar, Isle Avenger.
Yeah, very much a colorless
Pathwarden.
deck.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And Blinding Drone a really key component. How about the uncommons? There we are.
Ramp and Fatties.
Void Grafter's a very interesting card. This is Judgment, I think people have worked out, is better than it initially looked.
Oh, and this is Judgment's great. Yeah, it's a removal spell and a support card. Great card.
Okay. And finally, there you see the mix of Battle for Zendikar commons and uncommons in green-blue. So yesterday you can check out with Ian Duke the first 5 colour pairs. Today this has been Randy Buehler walking you through the rest of the Magic Online draft archetypes.